Let's talk about a legend today. A man whose fists could launch a heavyweight into orbit, whose chin was made of granite, and whose journey through combat sports is the stuff of legend. You guessed it, we are talking about the Super Samoan himself, Mark Hunt.
Super Samoan Hunt!
Ever wondered what the heck happened to him? One minute he's dropping bombs in the UFC, and the next, well, he's off the radar. So today we are diving deep into the rise, the fall, and the resurgence of one of the most feared heavyweights to ever step into the ring or the Octagon. Now let's rewind the clock. Born in South Auckland, New Zealand, Mark Hunt didn't have the easiest start in life.
Yeah, my dad was molesting my sister since the age of 6, I think.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit. So, he used to beat the fuck out of all of us, pardon my French, but he was not a good person. He used to use the church, the Mormon church, because we were Mormons, and used the church as a cover. But he was actually a real piece of shit. So and we used to get beaten all the time, but not actually beatings like normal beatings. He would hog tie us. He was good at mental warfare, so he'd make us get on our knees as punishment, and he'll be out there.
Of Samoan descent, he grew up in a rough neighborhood, where fighting was more about survival than sport. One fateful night outside a nightclub, a bouncer saw Hunt throw down in a street fight and was impressed, not just by his power, but by his raw potential. "Hey mate," the bouncer said, "you ever thought about doing this in a ring?" That invite led Hunt to a local gym, and the rest, as they say, is history. He skyrocketed through the ranks of K1, the premier kickboxing organization at the time. In 2001, he shocked the world by winning the K1 World Grand Prix. Imagine that. A guy who started training seriously just a few years prior is now standing atop the kickboxing world. His chin, unbreakable. His left hook, a certified sleep machine. Fans loved his no-nonsense style, walk forward, throw bombs, take whatever the other guy could dish out. But Hunt wasn't content with just kickboxing glory. In 2004, he made the jump to mixed martial arts, signing with the legendary Pride Fighting Championships in Japan. Now, Pride was the Wild West of MMA. Soccer kicks, stomps, the whole 9 yards. He faced killers like Vanderlei Silva and Mirko Cro Cop, names that still send shivers down the spines of old school fans. Sure, he was still rough around the edges when it came to grappling, but man could he bang. His fights were absolute wars, and even when he lost, he went out on his shield. Hunt's style was simple but deadly. Keep it standing, trade leather, and look for that one shot to end the night. He wasn't about the fancy stuff, no spinning kicks or flying triangles, just pure, unadulterated striking prowess. And the fans ate it up. UFC career. Fast forward to 2010. The UFC had now absorbed Pride, and along with it came some of the fighters' contracts. But here's the kicker. The UFC didn't really want Hunt. They even offered to buy out his contract just to avoid bringing him over. But Hunt? Well, he wasn't having any of that. He insisted on fighting. So in his UFC debut, he faced Sean McCorkle at UFC 119. And let's be real, it didn't go well. He got caught in an armbar and tapped in the first round. Not exactly the start that he or anyone was really hoping for. But if there's one thing we know about Mark Hunt, it's that you can never count him out. He bounced back with a vengeance, racking up a string of impressive victories. He knocked out Chris Tuchscherer with an uppercut that could have felled a tree. Then came wins over Ben Rothwell, Czech Congo, and that unforgettable walk-off KO against Stefan Struve where he broke Struve's jaw. Classic Hunt. And who could forget the absolute slugfest against Antonio Bigfoot Silva in 2013? It was a 5-round war that ended in a majority draw. But for fans, it was an instant classic, a fight of the night, and later upgraded to fight of the year by many media outlets. Both men left everything in the cage, and Hunt's stock skyrocketed, even without the win. Then came his shot at gold. In 2014, after some reshuffling due to injuries, Hunt found himself facing Fabricio Werdum for the interim UFC heavyweight championship at UFC 180. He started off strong, even dropping Werdum early. But in the second round, Werdum landed a flying knee that stunned Hunt, leading to a TKO loss. Still, the fact that Hunt was fighting for a UFC title was a testament to his perseverance. From being unwanted by the UFC to headlining a pay-per-view for the belt, that's a story right there. Fan favorite status. What made Mark Hunt a fan favorite wasn't just his knockouts, although those certainly did help. It was his humble demeanor, his straightforward attitude, and his willingness to fight anyone, anytime. No trash talk, no theatrics, just a fighter's fighter. He became known for those epic walk-off KOs. You know, the ones where he'd land a massive shot and before the ref could even step in, he would just turn and walk away, knowing that the fight was done. It was the epitome of cool, and fans couldn't get enough. Hunt's legacy in the UFC is one of resilience and raw power. He wasn't supposed to make it as far as he did, but he defied the odds time and time again. The Brock Lesnar fight. So let's turn our attention to the point where it all started going south for the Samoan. The showdown with Brock Lesnar at UFC 200 in 2016. This event was massive. It was a stacked card, new arena, all the works. Lesnar was making his return to MMA after a hiatus spent back in the WWE, and Hunt was pegged as the man to welcome him back. The hype was unreal. Lesnar, the former heavyweight champ with freakish athleticism against Hunt, the knockout artist with dynamite in his fist. Fans were buzzing. Could Hunt land that one big shot before Lesnar took him down? When fight night came, things didn't go as Hunt had hoped. Lesnar used his wrestling to control the fight, taking Hunt down repeatedly and neutralizing his striking. After 3 rounds, Lesnar won via unanimous decision. But the real story started after the fight. Just when the dust was settling, news broke that Lesnar had failed not 1, but 2 drug tests, both pre-fight and on the night of the event. He tested positive for clomiphene, an anti-estrogen agent often used after steroid cycles. Hunt was livid, and rightfully so. He felt cheated, arguing that the fight was unfair from the get-go. Lesnar was granted a special exemption from the 4-month USADA testing window that returning fighters usually had to go through. In Hunt's eyes, the UFC had bent the rules for Lesnar, putting him at risk against a potentially juiced-up opponent.
It's just embarrassing him against Mark Hunt. They knew he was on the juice. He went in there loaded to the gills. An embarrassing thing for everybody. And Mark Hunt had every fucking right to be mad. They put him in there with a guy that's coming off rocket fucking fuel. That dude just don't eat D-ball. Look at the size of his fucking head. He's taking shit that makes your fucking head grow. I hope they put him against Miocic. I will fly to fucking Cleveland. That gum is climbing at you.
He didn't mince words, calling out the UFC for what he saw as a failure to protect clean fighters. And this wasn't just about one fight, it was about the integrity of the sport and the safety of its athletes. This incident lit the fuse for what would become a long and bitter dispute between Hunt and the UFC. Legal battle with the UFC. Feeling betrayed and let down by the organization that he fought for, Hunt decided to take legal action. In 2017, he filed a lawsuit against the UFC, its president Dana White, and Brock Lesnar himself. The allegations were heavy. Hunt accused them of fraud, battery, and civil conspiracy, claiming they knew Lesnar was using banned substances, but allowed the fight to proceed anyway. Essentially, he argued that the UFC put profits over fighter safety, exposing him to unnecessary risk.
Yeah, I feel like someone should have talked to Mark immediately and soothed it out with him. But here's what I can tell Mark, if Mark is listening. They tested the shit out of Brock Lesnar, and they didn't know. They didn't know. The only way they would have known is if USADA told them. So USADA tested him. He tested clean for a bunch of them, and then he tested positive for the one that was like, I think 3 weeks out of the fight, and then there was the other one that he tested for post-fight. So I don't know what was going on. I mean, it's just speculation.
Yep.
But it could have been that he was just really struggling in camp. And his, look, here's what he took, allegedly, right?
Allegedly.
He took estrogen blockers. And the only reason that anybody takes estrogen blocker on purpose is to restart their testosterone after they do a steroid cycle. That's why you take it, when you take it on purpose.
Yep.
And he wasn't just seeking financial compensation, though that was part of it. Hunt wanted to shine a light on what he perceived as unfair and dangerous practices within the UFC. He wanted change. Legal battles are rarely quick or straightforward, and this one was no exception. In 2019, a federal judge dismissed most of Hunt's claims, including the fraud and battery charges. The court found that there wasn't sufficient evidence to prove that the UFC and Dana White conspired to harm him. Hunt appealed, and for a moment it looked like some of the charges might be reinstated. But in the end, the appeal was denied and the case was dismissed entirely in 2021. The lawsuit cost Hunt a lot: time, money, and perhaps most importantly, his relationship with the UFC. While he didn't get the legal victory that he sought, he did bring public attention to the issues of doping and fighter safety in MMA. Unsurprisingly, suing your employer does not do wonders for workplace relations. Hunt's relationship with the UFC and Dana White became severely strained. He was outspoken in his criticism, calling out what he saw as hypocrisy and neglect. He felt marginalized, claiming that the UFC was giving him tough matchups without fair promotion or consideration. In interviews, he didn't hold back, using colorful language to express his disdain for the organization. The trust was gone, and it was clear that this wasn't a relationship that could be easily repaired. Departure from the UFC. Despite the ongoing legal drama, Hunt still had fights left on his contract. His performances, however, started to dip. He suffered losses to Curtis Blades, Alexei Olenek, and Justin Willis. The once feared knockout artist was now on a losing streak. His last fight in the UFC was against Justin Willis in December 2018. Hunt lost via unanimous decision. It wasn't the storybook ending that fans might have hoped for, but the circumstances were far from ideal. Age, injuries, and the weight of the legal battles seemed to have taken their toll. The fire was still there, but the results weren't matching up. Several factors led to Hunt's departure from the UFC. First and foremost was his discontent with how he felt fighters were treated, especially regarding pay and safety regulations. He was vocal about fighter compensation, arguing that athletes put their health on the line but didn't receive a fair share of the revenue. The Lesnar incident only amplified his concerns about safety and doping. With his contract fulfilled and no renewal in sight, Hunt parted ways with the UFC. It was the end of a tumultuous chapter in his career. Never one to hold back, Hunt made his feelings known publicly. Through interviews and social media, he criticized the UFC and Dana White, accusing them of favoritism and neglect. He advocated for better treatment of fighters, pushing for things like health insurance, pensions, and a more stringent approach to doping. His outspokenness resonated with some fans and fighters who shared similar concerns. Hunt wasn't just complaining, he was calling for systemic change in a sport he loved but believed was flawed. Life after the UFC. Did you think Hunt was done with combat sports? Not quite. In December of 2020, he returned to his roots, sort of, by stepping into the boxing ring against Australian Rugby League star Paul Gallen. The fight took place in Sydney, and while Hunt showed flashes of his old power, he ended up losing via unanimous decision. It was his first professional boxing match since 2000. Some critics questioned why he was taking these fights at this stage, but Hunt seemed to be doing it on his own terms. Then came November 2022, when he faced another rugby star turned boxer, Sonny Bill Williams. This time, Hunt turned back the clock. In the fourth round, he landed a barrage of punches that led to a TKO victory. At 48 years old, he proved he still had that knockout power. After the fight, Hunt announced it would be his final combat sports appearance. If that's the case, he went out with a bang, literally. Other endeavors. Outside the ring and cage, Hunt has been keeping busy. In 2015, he released his autobiography, Born to Fight. The book is a raw and honest look at his life, from a troubled childhood to the heights of combat sports fame. He doesn't shy away from the tough topics, discussing his family struggles, personal demons, and the challenges that he faced along the way. Family has always been important to Hunt. He is a father and often shares glimpses of his family life on social media. Post-UFC, he is focused on spending quality time with his loved ones and prioritizing his personal well-being. Hunt remains active on platforms like Instagram and Twitter. He shares training videos, personal updates, and unfiltered opinions on the state of combat sports. Whether he's hitting pads, cooking up a Samoan feast, or dropping truth bombs about fighter pay, his followers stay engaged. He's not afraid to speak his mind, and that's part of what keeps his fan base loyal. Hunt also continues to be a vocal advocate for fighters. He has pushed for better health regulations, fair pay, and more comprehensive support for athletes during and after their careers. He is also involved in mentoring young fighters, offering guidance both in and out of the gym. For Hunt, it's about giving back to the community and helping the next generation navigate the pitfalls that he encountered. His advocacy work hasn't always made him popular with promoters, but it has earned him respect among many fighters and fans who share his concerns. What went wrong? So what exactly went sideways for Mark Hunt in the UFC? Well, let's break it down. The Lesnar fight was the tipping point. Hunt felt that the UFC's drug testing policies didn't do enough to protect clean fighters. Allowing Lesnar to fight with a special exemption from the usual testing protocol was, in his eyes, a blatant disregard for fairness and safety. And he wasn't alone in these concerns, but he was certainly one of the loudest voices. His public criticism put him at odds with the organization, leading to tension that never really eased. The lawsuit escalated things to a point of no return. Accusing the UFC and its president of fraud and conspiracy is a big deal. Even though the case was eventually dismissed, the damage to their relationship was irreversible. The legal battle consumed time and resources, and while Hunt stood by his principles, it also affected his standing within the promotion. Another thing that didn't help him stay in the UFC longer was his age and performance. Father Time is undefeated, as they say, and by the time he left the UFC, Hunt was in his mid-40s. The heavyweight division is more forgiving age-wise, but the wear and tear of years of fighting cannot be ignored. His last few fights in the UFC did not go his way. Whether it was due to age, the quality of opponents, or the mental strain from his disputes with the UFC, the results were the same. Losses that piled up. It's hard to keep momentum going under those circumstances, and the UFC seemed less interested in promoting him as a top contender. Current status. So where does that leave Mark Hunt today? After his victory over Sonny Bill Williams, Hunt announced his retirement from combat sports. At 48 years old and with a career spanning over 2 decades in multiple disciplines, he has earned the right to hang up the gloves. He has hinted that he's ready to focus on life outside of fighting, spending time with family, exploring personal projects, and enjoying the fruits of his labor. But don't think for a second that Hunt is just lounging around though. He has made various appearances on podcasts, interviews, and documentaries, sharing stories from his career and offering insights into the fight game. His perspective is unique, brutally honest, and unfiltered. Fans appreciate hearing from someone who isn't afraid to speak his mind, and media outlets know that having Hunt on is guaranteed to generate interest. There is talk of Hunt getting involved in gym ownership or opening training facilities. With his wealth of experience, he would be an invaluable resource for up-and-coming fighters. He has also expressed interest in other business opportunities, though details are scarce. Given his determination, it is a safe bet that whatever he pursues, he'll give it his all. But perhaps most importantly, Hunt continues to advocate for fighter rights. Retirement has not silenced him. If anything, he's gotten more freedom to speak openly without contractual obligations holding him back. He remains a vocal critic of how major promotions handle fighter pay, healthcare, and retirement support. Whether through social media or public appearances, he is keeping the conversation alive.